Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 20 cable stations from Vermont to New York City and 24/7 on the internet at thestruggle.org. Richard Greeman's newest book is Vegetarian Sharks, Radical Rants and Internationalist Essays. He spoke about his book this spring in Middletown, Connecticut. He talks about the radicals in the 1950s and 60s, and his ideas for alternatives to capitalism in this age of capitalist collapse. He also talks about activism he took part in Middletown, Connecticut and New Haven, Connecticut many years ago, including his invitation to Yale of an advocate of Negro armed self-defense.
Well, I'm very proud of this book. It culminates about 50 years as an agitator and organizer and also thinker and writer in the U.S. Socialist movement and in all the other movements that we've had against racism, against war, against nukes. And so I'd like to present this book to you by a few readings. And I'm going to start with the beginning because that's where I tell why I write and what's in the book. Okay? Why do I write? Early on in my political education, I came to the conclusion that activism alone was not enough. Capitalism could not be reformed, and only in a new society could my dream of peace, justice, and equality be realized. In addition, by the age of 18, I had read enough about the nightmarish condition of workers in communist Russia and in China to reject the dogmas of the fellow traveling progressive milieu in which I grew up, especially after the brutal suppression of the Hungarian Revolution of Workers' Councils in 1956, put down by fraternal Russian tanks, an act that disillusioned my dad. Fortunately, I came under the influence of small revolutionary groups in New York City, also in New Haven, Detroit, and Paris, which were based on more democratic principles of libertarian socialism and critical humanist Marxism. As a result, I had the great luck to hang out with older political activists, including veterans of the Russian anti-Stalinist oppositions, the Spanish Revolution, and the European anti-fascist resistance. Among these mentors were first-rate theoreticians who themselves were questioning every ideological dogma, including Marxists like Cornelius Castoriadis, Raya Dunayevskaya, Mark Shirik, Max Shachtman, Jean Malaquet, and others in Europe. And of course, the son of Victor Serge, Vladi Kibalchich. And we'll talk more about Victor Serge, who for me is an exemplar of someone who retained his revolutionary purity when the revolution in Russia went sour, and who was also a magnificent writer in the French language, and I've translated his books over the years, 6 of his novels now, from French into English. And the latest one, published by New York Review Books in 2008, last year, was mentioned on 2 lists of the best translations into English for the year. And the name of that book is Unforgiving Years by Victor Serge, S-E-R-G-E. We'll get back to him. I also, in those days, knew anarchists like Russell Blackwell and Sam and Esther Dolgoff, whom we met up here, remember, at Powder Hill when there was some sort of great hippie reunion, as well as radical journalists like I.F. Stone, Izzy Stone, and Daniel Singer. These extraordinary men and women were living links to the revolutionary past. They incarnated the ethos, breathed its energy, spoke of people like Trotsky and Emma Goldman as if they had just left the room. I had the impression in our conversations of being initiated into an oral tradition which paralleled and completed the reading of history and the sacred texts of Marxism. Along with my day-to-day activism, such discussions were the universities in which I completed my political education while earning degrees in French from Yale, Columbia, and the Sorbonne, mostly in my spare time. And I talk about my political itinerary in the last chapter of this book. With such a political education, I've never been tempted to turn away from Marxist humanism and anarchist ideas, which alone are capable of explaining the errors of past revolutionary movements, hopefully to avoid repeating them. It also taught me to cherish and study our collective positive experience, the rare historical moments when the tremendous creative force of revolutionary humanity emerged and briefly lighted the way to the future. From the 1871 Paris Commune to the Russian Soviets of 1917, to the self-managed farms and factories collectivized and defended by the Spanish anarchists in 1936, to the worldwide risings of the 60s, culminating in the French General Strike of May 1968, and finally of this century's rising Latin American movements. Right. In this book, I attempt to transmit and elaborate for our times these working-class socialist and internationalist traditions in the hope that coming generations will rediscover and reinvent them. And that's why in my 70th year, I've put this book together to pass on. Two main concepts, borrowed from Victor Serge and Rosa Luxemburg, dominate my outlook: internationalism and tolerance. For me, internationalism is basic. In our age of multinational corporations, the only way to defend ourselves against global capitalism is globally, through the planetary unity of the working, thinking, creative people in all countries. This was the dream that united Marx and the anarchist Bakunin in the First International, and to me, internationalism says it all. Despite the temptations of nationalism, identity politics, and despair, we must continue to act locally, think globally. So with each concrete struggle, whether it be over wages or whether it be over civil rights or pollution or anything else, we must ask ourselves these key questions. Does this tactic increase solidarity with people of other nationalities or divide us? And does this tactic move us closer to our ultimate goal, a new society? To me, tolerance, respect for the other, is the only means to reach the revolutionary end. If by revolution we mean a new human society in which, and I quote Marx, the freedom of the individual is the basis of the freedom of all. Without respect for the individual, without freedom of opinion, without the right to dissent and the availability of unbiased information, we the people will never be able to find our independent path. Instead, we billions will forever be misled by corrupt or fanatical leaders and manipulated by controlled mass media. Instead of the infallible single party, I propose critical thinking, horizontal organization, and the development of an invisible international woven of thousands of links where people can discuss and decide everything for themselves. And I'm going to put in here a plug for my website, which is www.invisible-international.org. That's easy to remember, the Invisible International. For this reason, I'm uncomfortable with political labels other than internationalist. My Marxist friends consider me an anarchist because I reject the state and the self-designated vanguard parties that aim to conquer it.